The smell of barbecued ribs hit me first. That sweet, smoky scent I'd spent years perfecting on my old charcoal grill, now floating out of a party I wasn't welcome at. I stood at the curb, just far enough from the house that no one inside could see me, but close enough to hear faint laughter rising above the music. Somewhere in that crowd was my daughter, Julia, in her graduation cap, probably smiling for pictures while her mother held court like she always did, loud, polished, and a little too good at pretending. And then the door opened. Julia stepped out, still in her gown, holding a red Solo cup in one hand, eyes darting like a cornered animal. She spotted me, paused, and walked over like her shoes had turned to cinder blocks. "She didn't want you here," she said. "No hug. No hi, Dad. Just those 6 words." I nodded. No flinch. No anger. Just the silence I'd mastered after 22 years of being married to Denise. It was the kind of silence that makes people nervous, because it doesn't ask for anything. It just watches. Waits. I reached into the inner pocket of my blazer. The brass key was warm, as if it had absorbed every hour I'd spent preparing for this moment. I placed it in Julia's palm. "Give this to your mother," I said quietly. Then I looked her in the eyes. "And tell her, he's your father now." She blinked. "What?" I turned and walked away. Slowly. Not for drama. Not to make her chase me. Just slow enough for the silence to sink its claws in. Behind me, the door clicked shut. You ever spend 20 years raising a kid who might not be yours, and love her anyway? That's the kind of thing people don't talk about. They'll call you strong, or mature, or honorable, but what they really mean is quiet. Quiet enough not to make it awkward. Quiet enough not to ask questions. Quiet enough to pretend it didn't chip at your soul every time her smile reminded you a little too much of someone else. This story, it's not about rage. It's about patience and design. And look, since 97% of you listen without hitting subscribe, just do it now. It keeps this kind of work going. It keeps the engine running for stories some folks wish would stay buried. I got in my car and drove 6 hours home without touching the radio. Somewhere between the second and third hour, Denise would be upstairs, opening a drawer she hadn't touched in months. A drawer with only one item inside. A sealed envelope. White, legal, and very, very final. See, that key I gave Julia didn't open a lock. It opened a reckoning. It opened a story Denise thought I'd never tell. And it's just getting started. The key hit Denise's palm with a soft metallic clink, but it may as well have been a grenade pin. "What's this?" she asked Julia, too brightly, too quickly, like someone trying to keep their voice level after a door slams in the middle of the night. "Dad said to give it to you," Julia replied, eyes narrowing just slightly. "And he told me to tell you, he's your father now." Whatever that means. It was as if the music in the room dipped for just a second. Denise's smile stayed plastered on her face, but her eyes betrayed her, glass-hard and searching. She offered a chuckle, the kind meant for deflection. "Well, your father's always been a little dramatic, hasn't he?" Then, like an actress exiting stage left mid-scene, she patted Julia's shoulder, murmured something about needing a minute, and vanished up the stairs. She didn't go to her bedroom. No, she beelined to the guest room, the one she pretended was her reading retreat. Inside, she knelt beside the antique writing desk Martin gave her for their 10th anniversary, back when he still believed anniversaries meant anything. Her fingers hesitated over the lock. She'd only ever opened this drawer once since Martin moved out. More curiosity than necessity. It had been empty then, but this time she knew. This time the key had a purpose. The lock clicked. The drawer slid open. Empty. Except for one thing. One sealed white envelope. Her hands moved slower now. The denial was already leaking through her breath. She peeled the flap open with one nail, revealing a single sheet of paper inside. Her eyes darted to the notary's stamp before the content even registered. And then she saw the line that cracked the air around her like a bullet through glass. Transfer of legal guardianship. Julia Elaine Carter. Effective date. 6 months prior. Signed by Martin. Stamped. Filed. Witnessed. No letter. No message. Just legal language. The kind that leaves no room for arguing, no space for spin. The room felt smaller suddenly. Her polished facade slipped as she dropped onto the guest bed, the paper trembling in her fingers. 6 months ago? That meant he'd planned this before Julia's acceptance letter even arrived. Before the cap and gown fittings. before the endless guest list battles, before, before Julia had even invited him to the party. No, wait, Julia hadn't invited him. He had asked to come. Like always, asking, not assuming. Martin never presumed he was welcome. And now she understood why. It wasn't a reaction. It was an execution. That's when Denise's phone buzzed. She flinched like it was an electric shock. She checked it. Nothing urgent. Just the group chat with the other moms. Someone asking about parking. Outside the door, the party continued. Laughter, drinks being poured, fake congratulations echoing around the house like wind chimes covering up an oncoming storm. But upstairs, Denise sat frozen in the eye of it, one sentence repeating in her head like a whisper clawing at her sanity. He's your father now. She didn't know what that meant. Not fully. But one thing was already clear. Martin hadn't walked away. He had simply switched off the lights. Quietly, one room at a time. And now, she was the one groping in the dark. The attic was the one place in the house Denise never touched. She said the dust gave her migraines, and the insulation made her skin itch. But Martin liked it that way. It was his sanctuary, part workshop, part archive, part memory vault. Up there, beneath the creaky beams and fading insulation, he kept old project boxes, childhood crafts, and a couple of sealed cartons labeled just in case. That's where he was the night the mask cracked. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop. It was late. Julia was 16 then, and they'd just returned from a father-daughter robotics fair. Martin still had the event badge lanyard in his pocket. Denise had stayed home, with a headache. But when he got back and headed up to the attic to stash Julia's trophy, he heard her voice drifting up through the air vent. I know. He's still here. Of course he is. You know Martin. He doesn't leave. A pause. Then, low and sharp. She doesn't need him now. She has her real father watching over her. Time stopped. Martin didn't drop the trophy. He didn't gasp or stagger like some TV drama. He simply stood very still, every muscle going rigid, like the truth had reached up through the vent and gripped his spine. Her real father. You'd think the sting would have come from the word real, but it didn't. It came from the word now. Now. After 16 birthdays. After driving her to math camp every summer. After building her that ridiculous Mars habitat diorama in 4th grade because Denise was too busy with the fundraiser. After being the only one in the front row of her orchestra recital because Denise forgot what day it was. Now, suddenly, Martin was a placeholder. A bridge they had used. And now planned to burn. And still, he said nothing. Not that night. Not the next day. Not even after Denise walked past him in the kitchen, humming and stirring her coffee like she hadn't detonated the foundation of his life the night before. He just sat on the back deck that morning with his mug, watching the clouds roll in. Because here's what most people don't get. Martin wasn't weak. He wasn't clueless. He was precise. That attic wasn't just a place for dusty boxes. It was a place for observation, cataloging, quiet awareness. And now? Now he had the data. You see, Denise had confessed once before. Years ago, during an argument that got out of hand, when Julia was barely a toddler. She'd thrown it out like a poison dart. I don't know if she's yours, all right? I made a mistake, okay? But you're here, and he's not. Martin had forgiven her. Or tried to. He buried it, like men do. Piled it under tax forms and vacation photos and Julia's giggle when she used to call him Daddy-o. But hearing her say, now she has her real father? That wasn't a slip. That was a plan. So he made one of his own. It started with a folder, then a visit to an attorney 2 counties over, neutral ground, then phone calls, careful conversations with people who didn't know the whole story but were willing to do their part. He wasn't out for revenge. He was preparing a transfer, not just of legal guardianship, but of perception, of reality, of who had truly been there, and who was just now trying to step into a spotlight they hadn't earned. In the attic, Martin placed Julia's trophy on a shelf beside her first macaroni art frame. He stared at it for a long moment, then pulled the chain on the hanging light. Darkness swallowed the room, and from that night forward, he started treating truth like a circuit board, silent, wired, and waiting for the right voltage to bring it roaring to life. Denise's fingers trembled as she jabbed at her phone, smudging the screen with each failed attempt to tap Thomas's name fast enough. She hadn't spoken to him in over a year, maybe more, but his contact had remained in her phone under a harmless pseudonym, Masonry Guy. Her little private joke, since she always said Thomas could lay brick but couldn't build a damn thing. The call rang twice before going straight to voicemail. She cursed under her breath and tried again. Nothing. Her thumb hovered for a second. Then she scrolled quickly and tapped another number. Thomas's wife, Gail. Technically ex-wife now. She'd filed for divorce after that whole mess in 2019. Denise had watched it unfold from a distance, offering no help, no support, just vague, detached nods when Julia would occasionally ask, "Do you think Mr. Thomas is okay? He always looked so tired." Gail's number went dead too. Panic crept up like a slow fever. She stood at the window, watching party guests mill about the backyard, smiling and sipping and clinking glasses like they were in a goddamn rom-com, while her whole narrative, the one she'd curated and protected for years, was unraveling by the hour. And the key. That damn key. What had Martin meant? He's your father now. That couldn't possibly mean. No, it couldn't. Unless Martin had done something. Unless Martin had spoken to him. She sat down hard on the edge of the bed, her mind rifling through memories like loose papers in a storm. The last time she saw Thomas had been at a gas station by the county line. Coincidental, awkward. He hadn't asked about Julia, not directly, but he'd looked at her too long, with something between regret and dread. She remembered that now. She picked up her phone again. This time, she opened her messages. Nothing from Thomas. Until, suddenly, a new one appeared. From an unknown number. No subject. Just a short text. "I never told her. I swear. But if you did what I think you did, God help us all." She stared at the screen so long the display dimmed. Then, in the same moment Martin's car rolled past the faded "Welcome to Red Oak" sign, he thumbed his own phone and quietly deleted the message from Thomas. No reply. No reaction. Just a quiet swipe into oblivion, like he was erasing a ghost. The irony? Martin hadn't needed Thomas's help. Not really. He already had what he needed. A trail of inconsistencies, half-truths, and that one photo. The one taken at a cabin retreat 21 years ago. Denise in a blue fleece jacket, cradling a newborn Julia. And Thomas, young and stupid, with his arm wrapped around both of them. The photo had never been printed. Denise had deleted it from her gallery years ago. But Martin had access to the family cloud account. He always had. Denise never bothered to change the password. Why would she? Martin was predictable, dependable. He handled the logistics, the bills, the data, the digital housekeeper. Until one day he wasn't. Until one day, that photo, archived, restored, subtly edited to highlight the date and GPS coordinates, slipped into a folder marked Grad 2025 and quietly synced to the living room TV. Scheduled to start playing right about now. And as Denise sat alone in the upstairs guest room, paralyzed with a phone that had no answers, downstairs a slideshow began. It was all smiles and nostalgia at first. Julia's first steps, her 5th birthday, the science fair ribbon Martin framed like it was an Olympic medal. Then, midstream, that photo appeared. Just long enough for someone to notice. "Who's that guy holding you and your mom, Jules?" someone asked near the cheese platter. The music didn't stop, but Denise's world did. She was already halfway down the stairs when she heard Julia say softly, "I don't know." And for the first time in her curated little life, Denise realized she wasn't the narrator anymore. She was just a character. And someone else, someone terrifyingly quiet, had taken over the script. It started with a laugh. One of Julia's old classmates, Caleb, maybe, was standing near the kitchen island, watching the TV with a solo cup in hand. "Yo, Jules," he called out. "Look at this one. You were such a gremlin." Julia, laughing, leaned in. It was a photo of her as a toddler, face smeared with birthday cake, eyes wild with joy. Martin had taken that one. She remembered the moment, so clearly it stung. Then came another. Her in a ballerina outfit. A school field trip. Her high school robotics competition. Martin had driven overnight for that one, even after throwing out his back hauling boxes at his part-time job. And then it flicked to that photo. The laughter caught in people's throats. It was subtle at first. A couple of murmurs. A faint shift in the energy, like someone had cracked a window in the middle of winter. Julia stepped closer. The image was a bit grainier than the others. Older, less polished. But unmistakable. Her mother, much younger, holding a bundled infant. Julia, and standing beside her, arm gently around Denise's waist, was a man Julia didn't recognize. Tall, brown hair, smiling like he belonged there. Denise. Thomas. The file name in the corner read, cabin trip _July 2004 final. Julia blinked. What? The image lingered one heartbeat too long. Then the slideshow skipped forward to more innocent fare, Easter baskets, middle school class pictures. But the damage had been done. Whispers were immediate. Who was that guy? Didn't look like Martin. That was definitely baby Julia. She looked real cozy with him. Denise, across the room in a cream-colored cardigan and stiff smile, nearly dropped her wine glass. She shoved past the edge of the crowd with a tight smile that barely passed for polite. Sorry, folks. Technical difficulties, she said, and yanked the HDMI cable from the wall like it had insulted her personally. The screen went black. Mom, Julia said, her voice quiet but hard. Who was that man? In the photo with us? Denise didn't answer at first. She was too busy trying to smile through a sheet of glass that was starting to spiderweb. Oh, that? She said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Just a friend. From a long time ago. That photo must have been mixed in with the others somehow. Martin must have uploaded everything by accident. Just a friend. Julia repeated. Yes, honey. Someone I used to work with. He was visiting. You know how Martin likes to archive everything. Even the irrelevant junk. It was a decent lie. Clean. Quick. Delivered with the kind of confidence that once passed for charm. But it was too late. Julia's face didn't move. She just nodded once and turned away, quietly excusing herself from the conversation. Her cup was still full, untouched. Denise stood alone for a second, surrounded by noise, but cut off from it. An island in the middle of her own living room. The rest of the party tried to continue, but you could feel it. The air had shifted. There was a current now, pulling beneath the surface. Glances were exchanged like notes in a classroom. Conversations got quieter, shorter, and Denise could feel it all peeling away, one smirk at a time. In the dining room, someone whispered, "You think Martin knew?" Someone else replied, "He's an engineer." Of course he knew. Meanwhile, Julia walked into the downstairs bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the tub. She pulled out her phone, opened her photo gallery, and zoomed in on the man in the picture. Something in his face, his jawline, his eyes, felt off. Not wrong. Just unfamiliar. Foreign in a way that shouldn't be possible. That was her, in that photo. Her mother. But not her father. The certainty she'd always had, the bedrock assumption of who she was now cracked right down the middle. And the worst part? She had the growing, sinking feeling that this wasn't just an accident. Martin didn't upload that by mistake. No. He'd installed the crack and waited patiently for pressure to do the rest. 2 days later, just after 9 a.m., Denise opened her front door still in her robe, expecting to grab a package of overpriced moisturizer or some graduation thank you cards she'd ordered last minute. Instead, a courier in a gray windbreaker greeted her with a flat, emotionless signature, "Please." She signed without thinking, still sipping her coffee. The package was a thick, stiff envelope, legal grade, the kind that smelled like a courtroom. Her stomach tightened before her mind could catch up. She closed the door slowly. The envelope was labeled simply, "Personal, attention, Denise Carter." No return address. Just a small red stamp at the bottom that read processed. At first, she didn't want to open it. Not out of fear, but because some small, stubborn part of her still clung to the illusion that if she didn't look, it couldn't be real. That this whole chain reaction could be contained with enough PR damage control and a few well-practiced tears. But curiosity is a cruel surgeon. It doesn't cut clean. She sat at the kitchen table, slid her manicured nail under the seal, and pulled out the contents. On top, a yellow sticky note. Martin's handwriting. "I gave more than I had. You gave less than the truth." Beneath it, a neatly clipped stack of documents. She flipped through them, one by one, as her pulse began to hammer in her ears. Petition for legal relinquishment of paternal rights. Filed. Notarized. Signed. Statement of intent. Martin was removing himself from any current or future legal obligations regarding Julia Carter. Financial receipts, meticulously organized. Tuition payments for every semester, from elementary school through college. Labeled with institutions, dates, amounts. Medical expenses, braces, surgeries, eye exams, ER copays. all paid under Martin's insurance or out of pocket. Vacations, Disneyland, Yellowstone, even that chaotic beach trip in 2013 where Julia got stung by a jellyfish. Airfare, hotel, car rental, documented, printed, categorized. Even birthday gifts were listed. MacBook Pro, 2019. Paid in full. Graduation bonus. There were no accusations in the documents. No moral outrage. Just evidence. Cold. Irrefutable. A quiet declaration of, this is what I gave. All of it. And now it's done. Denise's throat tightened. It wasn't just a statement. It was an exit wound. And the worst part? She knew the law well enough to understand the implications. If Martin wasn't Julia's biological father, and she'd never dared confirm it legally, then this wasn't abandonment. It was a release. A clean break. She'd boxed him into the role of father without granting him the authority or respect of one. And now he was done playing house. She reached the last page and felt her breath catch. There, in quiet courier font, was the closing clause. This relinquishment does not represent an absence of care. It represents the conclusion of obligation. The door remained open for 21 years. It was not walked through. She set the document down and sat back, the quiet of the kitchen suddenly oppressive. It was like Martin had walked out of the burning house, but left all the fuel receipts taped to the walls on his way out. From upstairs, Julia's door creaked open. She came down the stairs slowly, barefoot, wearing a hoodie too big for her. Her hair was wet. She must have just showered. She walked into the kitchen, saw the envelope, saw her mother's face. "What's that?" she asked. Denise started to answer, then stopped. Because how do you explain a man choosing to stop being your daughter's father on paper, but never once stopping being her father in action? She folded the documents. Carefully, slowly, and for the first time in years, she felt like the one holding a role she didn't fully understand. Outside, a wind picked up. Dry leaves scattered across the porch. Inside, the woman who built a life on careful control now found herself with paperwork in one hand and no script in the other. Julia didn't tell anyone she was going. She waited until Denise left for her weekly networking brunch at that overpriced farm-to-table spot where she pretended to care about city council initiatives and vegan cheese. Then she grabbed her keys, threw on a hoodie, and drove 40 minutes west, past the highway exit where the road started looking like something out of her childhood. Gas stations, billboard churches, and the old family diner that had shut down during COVID. Martin's place was smaller than she remembered. A modest one-story with a rusted mailbox and a porch swing that creaked in the wind. The yard was neat, but not manicured. No more rose bushes or decorative hedges like back at the house. Just grass, trimmed short, with a few stubborn dandelions breaking through like tiny rebellions. He opened the door before she knocked. "Hey, kid," he said. No surprise in his voice. No smile either. Just steady. Julia stood there for a beat, unsure why her throat felt tight. "Hey," she finally said. "I was in the area." He nodded, stepping aside to let her in. Inside, the house smelled like fresh coffee and old books. Not staged. Not curated. Just lived in. They didn't talk at first. He handed her a mug of tea. Lemon ginger. No sugar, just how she liked it. A small, invisible detail that made her stomach twist. They sat on the back patio, the wind gently tugging at the edges of the world, and for a while, they said nothing. When Martin finally spoke, he didn't mention the party, or the photo, or the documents. "I opened a safety deposit box in your name," he said, pulling a slip of paper from his pocket. He handed it to her like it was a business card. "There's a key inside, to another box. That one's at a different bank. I split them up for redundancy. Old habit." She blinked, staring at the paper. "What's in it?" she asked. "Money," he said. "Mostly. A few other things. Letters. Notes from when you were little. Photos I didn't post. I've been putting money in that account since you were 7. It's under a trust that activates the moment you touch the key." Julia looked up slowly. "Mom doesn't know about this." "She's never known," he said calmly. "She wasn't meant to." Silence stretched between them. Julia studied his face, the quiet strength of it, the little lines carved by decades of squinting in sunlight and smiling through other people's noise. He didn't look sad. He didn't look smug. He just looked done. Julia opened her mouth to say something, but didn't. Instead, she took the slip, folded it neatly, and placed it into her pocket. You're not going to tell me what to do with it? She asked. Martin tilted his head. You're grown, Julia. You don't need instructions. You need choices. Another silence. Then, almost inaudibly, she asked, Why didn't you fight? For what? He said. A title? A seat at a table I wasn't invited to? She didn't respond. Didn't argue. Because something about the way he said it felt final. Martin stood, stretched his back with a small grunt, and picked up the empty mugs. I'll walk you to the car. But she was already standing. I can find my way, she said, voice thinner than she meant it to be. He nodded, not offended. She walked to the car in silence. Opened the door. Hesitated. Then got in. No goodbye. No hug. No we'll talk soon. Just the engine humming to life and tires crunching softly down the gravel. Martin watched her go, the same way he'd watched her take her first wobbly steps in their old backyard, ready to catch her, but knowing he wouldn't be asked to. And Julia? Julia drove home with the safety deposit slip burning in her pocket like a fuse. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. But something had shifted in her. A tectonic plate beneath years of well-rehearsed memories had slipped. Just a little. Enough to make everything tilt. Because now, for the first time in her life, she wasn't wondering what her mother had kept from her. She was wondering why. Denise made the reservations at Maison Vert, a pretentious French fusion spot with dim lighting and just enough ego to mask its mediocrity. She picked the corner booth near the fireplace. She wore navy. Understated, tasteful, not too maternal, not too fragile. Controlled. Like everything she did. She'd texted Julia earlier that day. Let's talk. Just us. Or if you need him there, fine. I'll answer everything. Julia replied with a simple, He's coming. That alone told Denise she was already down a few pawns. They arrived separately. Julia walked in first, chin set, eyes guarded. Martin followed 5 minutes later, in a gray jacket and plain black polo, holding a worn leather folder under his arm like it was a menu he already knew by heart. The waitress brought water. Denise asked for red wine. Martin didn't order anything. Small talk never happened. Julia went straight to the point. So, Mom, who was that man in the photo? Denise smiled, tightly, and started weaving her version. He was a colleague. From years ago. We were close for a brief time. It was complicated. I was overwhelmed with being a new mother. You know how those years can blur. And your father, Martin, he was traveling so much then. He wasn't present. And Thomas, he was just there, offering comfort. Julia stared at her. No emotion. Just listening like she was watching a story she didn't believe but didn't want to interrupt, out of curiosity for how far it would go. I never planned to deceive anyone, Denise continued. I just didn't think it mattered. He disappeared. You had Martin. He raised you. That's what counts. Martin set the folder on the table without a word. Denise glanced at it. Her voice faltered. What's that? Martin didn't answer. Just slid it toward Julia. Julia opened it. Inside were 3 documents. The first page had the letterhead of a private genetics lab. The second, a chain of custody form. The third, results. The bold black line across the center read, Probability of paternity, 0%. Julia's hand didn't shake at first. She read it, reread it, looked at the dates, the signatures, the test ID. Then her fingers began to tremble, so slightly it looked like a breeze had passed through her. She looked at Denise. Denise's lips parted. Sweetheart, that test means nothing. It's paperwork. It doesn't change who loved you, who raised you. But Julia didn't speak. She didn't blink. She stood and walked out. No yelling. No dramatics. No, how could you? Just the sharp scrape of a wooden chair on tile. The soft click of heels disappearing toward the door. Denise turned to Martin, face twisted into something between panic and fury. Why would you do that here? Like this? You humiliated her. Martin took a sip of water. I didn't humiliate her, he said. I clarified things. She didn't need that folder. She asked. You just gave her fiction. I gave her facts. Denise reached for the folder like she meant to tear it, burn it, erase it from existence. But Martin was already standing. Calm. Finished. She needed a clean start, he said. Now she has one. Then he walked away, same pace as always. Back at the booth, Denise sat alone, the untouched wine glass trembling slightly in her hand. Around her, the restaurant buzzed on, unbothered, unaware. But she knew. She knew what had just happened. Julia's silence had been louder than any accusation. And Martin's exit wasn't a retreat. It was a conclusion. It started with a single photo. No caption, no context, just an overhead shot. A brass key resting beside a DNA results folder on a weathered wooden table. A faint ring from a coffee mug stained the edge of the paper, almost like it had been there a while. Julia posted it to her Instagram story first. Then, 10 minutes later, her main feed. The silence spoke volumes. By noon, it had over 400 comments. By the end of the day, nearly 2,000. And it wasn't just college friends or cousins chiming in with heart emojis or vague support. It was everyone. Old neighbors from the cul-de-sac where Julia learned to ride a bike started commenting. Martin used to wait at the bus stop even when it rained. He came to every HOA meeting and never raised his voice. Didn't he build Julia's treehouse himself? Spent the whole summer on it. Another posted a grainy photo from a 4th of July barbecue years ago. Martin holding Julia on his shoulders, sparklers in her tiny hands. Denise is just off to the side, smiling, but not present. That same user added. He was always there, even when she wasn't. Then came the Whisper Network. Someone from Denise's book club dropped a comment. She used to brag about being a chess player in a world of checkers. Always felt like she saw people as pieces. Someone else replied, remember when she joked about engineering her life? Thought she was just being clever. The dam cracked when an old yearbook photo surfaced. Julia as a toddler at a company family day picnic. There, in the background, was a younger Thomas, arms casually around Denise, both watching baby Julia toddle around on the grass. And once that image hit Twitter, it spread like wildfire. Side-by-side comparisons were posted. Threads popped up. Let's talk about how Martin raised someone else's child for 21 years and never asked for anything but a seat at her graduation. Denise played long con queen. Problem is, she forgot quiet men keep receipts. Memes began circulating. A picture of a brass key photoshopped over the Iron Throne. Caption, he's your father now. Even people who didn't know the family started picking sides. And somehow, the side with fewer words, the one that didn't spin, didn't beg, didn't post, started to win. Martin, for his part, didn't respond. He didn't post anything. He didn't heart comments. He didn't issue a statement or clarify intentions. He just remained still, absent. But that absence wasn't silence. It was dominance. Because while Denise had always controlled the script, loud, calculated, polished, Martin had done something far more dangerous. He handed the pen to everyone else. And they rewrote her story without mercy. The cracks in Denise's world became chasms. A parent from Julia's school texted her directly. Did you really keep him out of the graduation photos? Her sister left a voicemail, tight-lipped and quiet. I warned you not to lie to her. She deserved better. Even Gail, Thomas's ex-wife, posted a single, pointed comment under Julia's photo. Truth always finds its way home, even when it's got to crawl. And Denise? She tried to post a rebuttal. A long, windy caption about misunderstandings and complex family histories. But by then, the current had already pulled her under. No one bought it. Because in the court of public opinion, emotion is evidence. And the world had already seen enough. A daughter's quiet rejection, a man's documented devotion, and a woman, once in control, now watching her empire collapse from the inside out. Not with a bang, but with a key in a folder. Julia's new apartment was nothing fancy. Top floor of a red brick walk-up with mismatched cabinet handles and a toilet that groaned when you flushed. But it was hers. The place still smelled faintly of fresh paint and takeout cartons, and string lights blinked unevenly around the window frame like they couldn't decide whether to celebrate or mourn. Martin brought a folding chair and a bottle of non-alcoholic cider. He didn't need to say much when he walked in. Julia hugged him hard. No hesitation this time. And when she pulled back, she looked up at him with something heavier than guilt, but lighter than grief. I'm sorry for what I said on the porch, she whispered. He shrugged. You didn't know. A pause. You do now? They sat in the corner while her friends bustled in the kitchen, shouting about burnt dumplings and spilled wine. Someone turned on music. For a moment, it felt like peace had come wearing sweatpants and a paper plate. Then came the knock. 3 soft raps. Hesitant. Julia answered the door without asking who it was. She already knew. Denise stood there in a beige cardigan and perfect hair, holding a small box wrapped in pastel paper. Her eyes flicked past Julia into the apartment. I just came to. Julia didn't raise her voice, didn't make a scene. She simply said, "You don't have a key anymore." Denise blinked. The box trembled in her hands. "I carried you, Julia. I bled for you. And he built me," Julia replied. One truth at a time. She didn't slam the door, just closed it. Quiet. Clean. Inside, Martin didn't react. He sat calmly, finishing his cider, watching the world settle into its rightful places. A few minutes later, when the others had migrated to the kitchen, Julia returned to his side. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in an old handkerchief. A key. Not brass. This one was steel. Slim, modern. He pressed it into her palm. "To the box," he said. "The real one. You'll want to see what's in there." She turned it over slowly, then looked up. More receipts. Martin chuckled. "Nope. No more receipts. Just letters. And one photograph I waited 20 years to give you." She didn't ask what it was. She didn't need to. Not yet. Outside, Denise sat in her car with the old brass key in her fist, fingers white around the edges, knuckles trembling. She'd come thinking maybe, just maybe, she could patch it all. Say the right things. Wear the right expression. Twist the moment into something manageable. But Martin had changed the locks. Not just literally. Metaphorically. Emotionally. Permanently. The key she had was a relic. A symbol of the door she once controlled. Now, it didn't open anything. Inside, Julia laughed for the first time that day, really laughed. Not out of relief or vindication, but because something in her had finally aligned. Not perfectly, not painlessly, but truthfully. And Martin? He just sat back and listened. Because sometimes the loudest victory is knowing you don't have to say a word.